Herv, good to see you. Thanks for making a bit of time to come and have a chat. I know you're busy, like every CEO I know. I think you've got more to do than you've got hours in the day. So I appreciate you making a bit of time. Let me kick off with something that really interested me when we were talking last time. I mean, you made a really important point, I think, which was that when criminals use AI, they won't follow your rules. And I thought that's a really interesting point in terms of understanding security of assets and all the rest of it. Just tell us what you meant by that and tell us why you think it's important.
Yeah, so I think when I say are not using AI, don't have any rules. I see a lot of people talking about AI as a
Mm.
solution to the crimes and so forth. And that came from a an event I was in, and I was invited in a work group on fighting financial crime, where bankers and regulators are saying we're using AI, right? And I'm thinking, wait a minute, your AI has to obey by regulatory rules, privacy and other things, whereby the AI of the criminals doesn't have any rules. And we see that, kind of the same way as if I have my agent, I have to do a whole bunch of validation to obey the rules. But I can also get an agent that can be generated by a Chinese AI, for example, that will not ask me for any of those validation. And I think we see more fraud being, impersonation fraud being using AI to pretend. And that's if you're counting only on AI, you are at a disadvantage, basically.
Yeah, I think that's a really well made point, actually. And tell me, what is it that your business, because you're trying to do something about that in a rather innovative way. I mean, what is it that you're trying to do exactly?
Yeah, so what we're doing is basically, we started with a global payment platform and the KYC being there, and we figured there is a need to authenticate yourself, but in a way that is on a risk-adjusted basis, based on the transaction that you're doing, and without centralized identity, which is a cause of, I mean, you're the chief uncensored. Censorship comes in when big data owner, whether it's YouTube or other, can have your identity. So if you have that decentralized identity and it is accountable within a jurisdiction that is not the US or China like it is today, you bring more freedom and you bring more crime prevention because if there's a criminal activity that happens based on an ID that is even identified in the US or in China, then what recourse do I have? What does the criminal has in terms of accountability if I need to go to the US or China to get my rights enforced? So decentralization and sovereignty of identity and multiple identity are what we're working on in the solutions.
And how, I mean, just at a practical level, how would that work? I take your point that if there's only one sort of authentication, once they've got into that, they've got you, haven't they? You're talking about saying that there's multiple ways of authenticating, so they can't access everything. They can only potentially hack one part. I mean, I follow the logic of that. Tell me how that would work in practice, though.
So in practice, today you take a big risk when you authenticate yourself in a number of different locations, like whether it's a hotel, right, or a building. They scan your passport, they have the video feed. I'm not saying the hotel is a criminal, but that's an opportunity for AI and being able to harvest that data. So if you can eliminate a bunch of those location that becomes custodian of your identity, and you narrow it down to identity custodian that you trust, taking the concept of a notary, that's why we call a notary node, that has the full information, but you select what you allow that notary to identify. That's where we see the opportunity. And of course, there are institutions that have to have your identity by law, financial institution, telcos. So we're looking at working with these as well as notary nodes. But in between, if you want to authenticate yourself to a dating site, you may not want to use an authenticator or a custodian that is your financial institution or even your phone. So remaining private and having on a need to know basis the identity being shared and controlling who has access to that data. So who's the custodian of the data, the physical data, and the legal custody as well, because not all countries around the world can offer the data center to manage that, but they certainly can have their own authenticator locally. Right?
Yeah, and I certainly see the benefits of that. Let me ask you, what was it that set you on this path? I mean, it's quite an interesting area to be sort of developing technology in. I mean, how did you end up doing this? I mean, what was it? How did you end on this path? How did you get on this path?
So part of it is, the privacy and the fraud prevention, right? And and the other part is greed, and I'll explain both. The first part is, I've been scammed by my wife clicking on the wrong hyperlink into a Telegram thing, and her Telegram bot taking ownership of her Telegram and helping us get rid of some extra money we had in our account. This is one of the impersonation, and this is something that somewhat is controlled by identity using Dun and Bradstreet in App Store and Google Play Store, right? But that again centralized, and I figured it would be great to have something that is within your own jurisdiction for being able to, or a jurisdiction that you accept before you click on that link. The second part, as I say, is greed, is because we were looking more at what did World ID do? World ID created WorldCoin to reward their thing, and if you're not familiar, it's some Ultimates platform, and they basically figured just preventing bots from being unauthenticated using a unique ID with biometrics, which we don't believe in, as I chatted earlier. They had a valuation of $3 billion, right? And zero revenue potential. So we figured we can match the two, provide a tools or a number of tools to be used for authenticated communication, whether it's a payment or just a simple communication or a product review. And we feel that business will pay for that, and therefore there's a revenue model. But the philosophy is still to be decentralized, so that the review of the restaurant in the UK doesn't have to stay with Google or Facebook in the US or with WeChat in China, can reside in the UK, where then that data becomes decentralized, and I think it's much more powerful. Of course, it takes time to start and get everybody on board, right? And of course, the additional thing is in the payment thing. That's one of my expertise, global payments, right? So we started with a global payment platform, and the KYC is into, okay, we need to find out, I need to know my customer. But then again, there's in order to comply with cross-border payment, I need to know my customers' customers, and then be able to do that validation has become something that's an opportunity for, before I ask my bank to send a payment to this counterparties, would I not want to know that that counterparty is authenticated and is not on the FBI most wanted? So that's kind of the value of being able to know who your customer is. And I think there's our goal is, from that standpoint, to be like the Intel inside. There's this way to authenticate.
What I was wondering, I mean, it's a really interesting idea. It's very counterintuitive. It's a really interesting idea. But what I was wondering was, um, how did you kind of get on the journey towards delivering that? I mean, do you come from a technical background? Are you a Bitcoin person? I mean, what's your background, and how has that influenced this? What you pursuing this agenda, if you see what I mean?
So by background, I've always been in between technology and financial. When I was a banker, the banker saw me as the computer geek, and the tech guy saw me as the banker. Um, I, I built the first web-based trade finance platform, and we got the President E Award when I was in America. And I've always been, as a partially lazy person, kind of trying to find solution leveraging technology. And as we move in the Web3 world, we have a solution that we're putting in place to prevent fraud and prevent scam. But I thought we had the platform, we had the knowledge, and we have an opportunity to help decentralize basically that global identity and global payment as well, right?
Yeah. And what is it about your values that have influenced the way you've built the company? Because it strikes me that you've had a lot of influence shaping the way things work because you have a particular view about, security and what have you. I mean, what tell me about how your values have influenced the way you've built the company.
So the way I build a company, there's a couple things. Value is I like to work with the underdog, number one, which
Right.
is not always the smartest thing from a financial standpoint. And I also want to fight misinformation. Personally, when we're talking about blockchain and payment, I was introduced to that by being friendly with one of the victim of the biggest scam, if you know the one coin that happens there. So I was friend with one of the top guy that believed in it, and I believed in it at first. And because it's high enough that that kind of impacted my reputation, and there was kind of a challenge in being able to protect the people that have been scammed by this and bring transparency. So I think the blockchain brings plenty transparency, and I saw that as how do you bring how do you bring transparency, but you protect also privacy. And as I mentioned, I lost some money by somebody impersonating me with my wife, and for me it's not as bad, even though it's not insignificant, to lose money as I see on a regular basis, people that are losing their life saving, like in the one coin example, and more examples, some kids committing suicide because they think they're talking to girls that in their age bracket, but there is a Kenyan or an African scammer in the backhand that will use that to get information to really blackmail them and other things. So I
Yeah.
think there is a great opportunity for doing things better. And it's not until I saw the model of World ID that I say not only we can do something good, but we can make money in the process. And we can decentralize that, so incentivize basically partners in various countries to work together on a decentralized basis.
Mm, mm. Yeah, and I can see that. I can see why that would motivate you. Let me just ask you about that motivation thing there. I mean, when I talk to CEOs, I talk to a lot of CEOs. I mean, pretty much all of them say that building a business is like riding a roller coaster. There are good days and there are days that are really not so good. I mean, what is it that gets you out of bed every day to ride that roller coaster? Because building a business is hard work. It's tough emotionally. I mean, what is it that motivates you to kind of do that? Because you could go and put your feet up and do something else if you wanted, couldn't you? I mean, what is it that motivates you to build a business or this business?
Yeah, so I think I'm motivating by and driven by creating a solution to a problem that is general. That's one thing. I'm also motivating by my team. We have a close team that younger people that and you're right. I mean, I could put my feet up. I could retire. I am not. I even was talking to an investor that says, "Why are you raising money? You don't need money, right? You have future revenue." And I tried to explain to him that really. The centralized money raising way and control, right, is the thing that kind of goes against kind of the principle that I have, right? So yes, I'm at a certain age. I won't ride a bicycle through Asia, but I could put my feet up, and I think I wake up because I'm excited about the product, and
Yeah.
that's both an advantage and a disadvantage. Because as many of my friends and that I've known in business often tell me is that, Hervé, you always sell the new stuff, right? That's the product development and the excitement. And you don't make money because you don't sell the stuff that you've had for 10 years that works great. And that's a good point. But, that's what keeps me up. If I was to take a job either as a banker or, kind of as a sales of a product that's there and that works, that's boring. That doesn't wake I can't wake up in the morning for that. So that's what drives me,
Yeah.
innovation and the reward of seeing implementation of that innovation.
Yeah. And I think what you've said is a variation on what a lot of entrepreneurs would say. That's the thing that excites them and keeps them interested and keeps them plugging away, really. So I totally get that. I mean, I think I probably share that. I mean, I'm a bit like that. I'm not working in your space, but I certainly share that idea. Let me ask you about building the business, right? I mean, what would you say were when you started out? What would you say were the big challenges that you needed to overcome to get to where you are now? I mean, if you go back to the beginning, what did you think? What were the things you thought, God, that's a tough nut to crack. I'm going to have to do that, and I'm going to have to do that. And I mean, what were the big challenges that you thought you faced? And has that been right? Were they the challenges, if you like?
Yeah. So I would say, I first was an entrepreneur before I was an entrepreneur. I worked for a innovative banks in California. We were started by two entrepreneurs. And when I talk about that first system that I built, I asked for forgiveness rather than permission.
Yeah.
And it was frustration of seeing why do we use this old bulletin board type for letters of credit and communication and so forth? And, getting to complain. And when I talked to developers, software company, and I told them I wanted to get that on the web, their first reaction is, the internet will never work for commercial banking. Right. Obviously, I've had for decades a little bit of fun for the guys that are still alive, telling them, yeah, the internet is core. And I see the evolution of the platform as something that kind of drives me. It's innovation that drives me, being able to do things better. Now, I got my computer skills from terrible handwriting. So when I was in college, I started by using a PC to work. Then I built PC. Then I taught people with the degrees in computer science how to use their PC. And now we've got greater opportunity. The AI age is coming and bringing great opportunity. And that's kind of what kind of see how we can make a difference, right? Moving from a web-based interface to talking to your AI chat that will actually authenticate itself. Those are, I think, the opportunity in the future and what gets me up.
And were those challenges as difficult to overcome as you thought? I mean, it's very easy looking back to see how the internet and how valuable the internet is. But going back to the point, I mean, I remember the same situation, wondering whether the internet was ever going to come to anything. I mean, has the challenge that you thought you'd face, has that actually been as difficult to overcome as you thought? Was it hard, or did you just find a way through it easily?
No, I think it was very difficult. I was lucky that I came in with, when we started our company, when I left banking basically having conflict with the internal IT group and so forth, and not being able to develop what I wanted. And I started getting my first VC round where they started saying, "Hey, you got to burn, right? You got to burn more cash. You're gonna grow, grow, grow." And the .com imploded, right? We started as bizcurrency.com, which is still a good name for some of the business we're gonna do. And they're like, 6 months later, a year later, when the funds are burned, our first round, they're like, those guys are great. They run on fumes. So I was able to sustain the business and build the business that is I mean, we started to do like the Revolut model before Revolut was even on, and we couldn't do that without a bank license. So there's been a lot of challenges in and learning how to raise money, learning how to really develop, work with the tech guys that are always thinking a little bit different, and as I say, I couldn't say it was an easy process, but I can also say that it's something that was accelerating and interesting. So I
And
don't think I could be back a corporate bankers, even though or even just in the corporate world. And also the excitement that I have by moving to Asia and being able to, if you want, see a different world and
yeah.
not the rat race like Los Angeles was and so forth.
And were there critical moments in that journey that kind of shaped the way the business has developed? I mean, did you at any point come to a fork in the road and say, well, do we go that way or do we go that way? I mean, have you had moments like that that have shaped the way the business has turned out?
Yeah, absolutely. And when we started, we really wanted to be kind of a regulated money service business and so forth in California, and we didn't raise enough money to be you had to be a bank, right? And so that's the part where we then started having moving in some of the trade finance platform that we build. Again, the concept of decentralization. And we've adapted by working with various clients and partners. I think what brought us to Asia was a partnership with Bank of America to create a letter of credit platform where collaboration could happen. So it was going back to something that we built, but building it better. And the payment in forex and global payment is something that we saw. I think our first client was a forex company in Canada that started telling us again, we want the online trading, but people want to be on the phone with traders. They don't want to go online. This is just for marketing purposes, right? And we did that for them. They use our platform for 15 years instead of just 1 year for marketing. At which point they had kind of, with our help, I'm not blaming them, built their own platform, and they sold their company for $1 billion, right?
Nice,
At which
nice.
point I'm thinking, we're making about $10,000-15,000 a month doing all that work for them. They've learned from us, and obviously that was part of the deal. I'm not saying they did anything wrong. And then, what they thought had no value is sold for $1 billion. So we see all of those as opportunity. We built instant payment within our platform in a closed loop. We are also working now. We see a huge opportunity with deposit token for emerging country as well as bank, and embedding the governance and compliance and fraud prevention within the trust signal oracle that we build is the next opportunity. So
Yeah.
that's where we see. But again, I'm selling something that we're in the process of delivering that we haven't done.
And one of the things that's interesting about, I mean, you just described it, that one of the things that's happening at the moment is that things are changing very rapidly. I mean, and AI, of course, is accelerating that. How do you, as the CEO, how do you keep, if you like, the business on the front foot? How do you keep focused on the opportunities, the new things that there are, because it's very easy for teams of people to kind of sit back and say, okay, well, we're comfortable now. But really, your point is you have to keep moving. You've got to keep moving to survive, haven't you? Because the world is changing so quickly. I mean, how do you keep people on the front foot? How do you keep the business on the front foot?
Well, I think this is one thing that I'm always interested in the new tech and how we move forward. And as I mentioned earlier, this is an impediment to being able to deliver and things. So, we keep doing a lot there. and we should really kind of look more broadly and enforcing. And I think over the years, I'm correcting myself a little bit, but there's nothing that's going to stop me from looking for the next thing. And I have a unique experience. Even when I was a young banker, I was selected to speak at the APEC in Asia about digital payment, and a long time ago, about almost 30 years ago. So I've got that expertise in being able to blend the traditional finance with the new Web3 banking. I think is an opportunity, right? I'll give you an example. What we've done with the sovereign gold reserve token in DRC, I look at that as, and they call that a real world asset. I look at that as a banker, we've got gold underground that's moving outside. We're basically doing inventory financing through the tokenization. You've got guarantees from the government. It's kind of like that the gold is going to be delivered, and this happened to be a product that you don't have a problem selling when it's out and done. So we put all that process together. We also look at leveraging blockchain to be able to authenticate the asset behind it, and especially when it moves from the mines to mint. And we use the benefit of the blockchain, which some people may argue, well, this is more of a gimmick. We have the immutability and the tracking that's be move on chain, and we had to learn a lot on there and work with partners. And so
Let me ask you about the point you just made about, some people think that blockchain's a gimmick. I mean, I've heard that same thing. I mean, I don't think it's going anywhere actually, but I think some people still think it's a bit of a gimmick. One of the things that's interesting in building a business is that there is a lot of noise out there, isn't there? There's all sorts of stuff going on. And part of the job of the CEO is to work out what to focus on. I mean, how do you, if you like, cut through all the noise? Because there's hundreds of things you could do. How do you work out from all these things that are going on, we're going to focus on these things? I mean, what's your take on that process?
Well, I'll first start by saying that I do a terrible job at it as a CEO, because I'm excited about various things, and I mentioned a few things that are very decentralized. So that's certainly something that I work with some of my advisors that become friends, if you want, to really look at, hey, let's focus on this business, on that business. And often, sometimes I bring them on my side where they see all the various opportunity, and you become a jack of all trade, master of none, and that's one of the challenge. But I am trying to do better, because that's something that is focused and kind of narrowing down the various use case. One of the example I started a couple of years ago with somebody, Veritas Vine. And the idea was to leverage our technology to authenticate a bottle of wine from grape to consumption. Not only cut out the fraud, but also being able to provide feedback to our platform of the party that consuming, send it to a heaven or hell depending on their experience, and that information being available back to the producer. Well, this is a back burner thing because I cannot do everything, right? But I think when we look at the core infrastructure that we build with the foundation of trust, and we just need to build a few use case, and we have that on blockchain with sovereign gold reserve token. Usually, this is a government project. We have another government project to use our platform for payment. And then we have some clients that are using our platform for the boring stuff of being able to facilitate global payment through Swift or other counterparties.
I mean,
So,
you sound like me in the sense that you get interested in lots of different things and probably get easily distracted. I mean, that's certainly something I suffer from. Let me ask you about the other thing that you've just flagged up, though, which is about uncertainty. I mean, for example, I mean, I was talking to somebody who was doing a lot of work with government around sustainability and green energy. And then, of course, Trump got into power and that whole thing got wiped out. And they had £1 million wiped off their pipeline overnight almost. I mean, that kind of uncertainty is one of the other things. I mean, one is all the distractions, but the other thing is how do you work out what to bet on? Because there's so much uncertainty at the moment and things change so quickly. I mean, how do you work out, well, we're going to do this because I think that's the way forward. Given the amount of uncertainty, I mean, given that AI could come along and just change how things are done. I mean, how do you work out what to bet on?
So that is one of the advantage of having a broad view
Yeah.
and many horse in the race. This I'm smiling when you mention the green green energy and so forth. We started with the DRC project, right, with forest tokenization, being able to generate carbon credit, and same thing happened when Trump came in and say, I think it's a few years back, we pull out of the Paris Accord. People say, carbon credit, and some people say blockchain is a gimmick. Some other people say, the carbon credit. There's various other things. So I figured, we had a model with gold underground in Central African Republic, and that's a long story. So I talked to our partner and I say, why don't you tokenize the gold mine and then you create a twin token, which is what we've done. So we attract the greed from saying, here, you're going to get two tokens that are 1 gram each, which you can buy on the, right now it's only accredited investors and institutional at this stage for $100 a token, so $100 a gram when the market's at 160. So you get the attraction to that. And then I say, there is a need to compensate the holder of that token, because otherwise, why would they trust DRC project rather than Tether Gold or Paxo Gold? So I say we can, and at the time I wasn't thinking deposit token and the rules that we had. So I say we need to give them a reward. So what we've done is we've created a twin token with the forest carbon reserve token, that each token will generate a carbon credit every year. And that means now you have a unique thing, which is basically a gold token that is tied to a carbon yield, right? And the way it's been structured and working, of course, DRC being the core behind it, it's not a Swiss vault or a US vault in terms of security, but it brings you the equivalent of minimum of 20% yield, according to what I do not understand in the carbon credit management and so forth. But what I've done is I built the other token. We make it a twin token so that when I transfer a sovereign gold reserve token, you get half of a forest asset revert
I mean,
token, and so
what
on.
you're saying is that within every bit of uncertainty, there are opportunities. I mean, that seems to me to be what you're saying, isn't it? There's huge amounts of uncertainty, but that also creates opportunities. I think that's a really important thing to understand. Let me ask you about something else that interests me as well. I mean, you've moved to Southeast Asia from LA. I mean,
Yep.
doing business in London is different to doing business in LA, and I'm sure doing business in Vietnam or Cambodia or Thailand or Japan or whatever is different from doing business in LA. I mean, how do you feel about working in a very different culture, building a business in a very different culture? I mean, what's your take on the differences between the way the Europeans and the Americans do things? Because I know you're originally from France, and the way
Mhm.
things work in Southeast Asia. I mean, what's your take on the kind of cultural piece?
Yeah, so I think this is important to the way we see the cultural difference are definitely there. Yeah, I moved to California where I thought the US was the best thing in the world. And then, I had this deal with clients in Australia, so I moved to Asia. We were the first one as a software as a service. So, we got rid of our office in the early days. We moved in with our seed investors in Beverly Hills. We only had one meeting there with the banks. We usually figured most of the stuff was digital, right? And so that gives us a hedge. I come from a different culture. In America, I was in France until I was 17 and moved to the US. And then when I had the opportunity to move to Asia, it was kind of closer to Australia and so forth. And to tell you the truth, as of today, we don't have any clients in Thailand. We have a few discussion because I've lived here for 11 years now. My wife is Thai, and I have a live here. But I have staff in Cambodia, in Thailand, in the US, in France, in Australia, and those are I've been kind of a very decentralized kind of in the Philippines, right? And we're expanding to countries in Africa, right, without having directly our staff. So I think that's the new world, right? When people with social media have friends all over the world, although those friends are not going to help you move, there's friends that has a different meaning. And I think for me, it's been kind of a lifestyle choice, and I appreciate kind of the different culture and respect the different culture. We've had migration, whether it's in the UK or Europe, and being able to respect the country where you are and their culture, I think is important, and learn from that.
Mm.
Right. So,
I mean, I think you've made two really interesting points there. One is about treating different cultures with respect. It's not that the British culture is better than any other culture, is it? I mean, it's about treating other cultures with respect. And I think also your second point there's lots to learn from people doing things in different ways. It opens up all sorts of ideas and new ways of doing things. And I think those are really important points. Let me just ask you about what you've learned from the journey. I mean, you've obviously been on a bit of a journey, um, you know, geographically and in terms of you working in corporates and then creating this new business and what have you. I mean, when you look back on the journey that you've been on, what would you say the big things are that you've learned from that experience? What would be the top two or three really important things that you've learned from the journey that you've been on?
I think one thing is lifestyle, right? When I was a young banker in California, I was at work at 7 o'clock in the morning till 9 o'clock, and this was all work and not so being able to diversify and not take always everything kind of too seriously. So I think appreciate other culture, and so that's something that I do, right? Regardless of the culture, there are culture, and there's the good, the bad, and the ugly in every culture, right?
Yeah.
That I have learned. So not criticize or judge somebody because of their nationality, their race, their religion. I think that's something that is spoken in America, but not actively practiced, I would say, not as much as it's kind of brought up. So I've learned that. The other thing I've learned is taking care of my health because, the stress, the work, I was at one point in time obese and didn't realize my obesity until I was fat shamed, which I appreciate. That's why I'm alive. I had a heart attack, and then I've changed, and my staff is working certainly with me. So when I'm able to disconnect from the stress, and I think that's important because there's a right balance in life that focusing on work, you're not as productive, I think, as you would be when you're kind of being able to do something else and not. I'm always told, even to this day, that I cannot have a conversation with my wife and my friend without bringing work. But it's not work; it's basically the innovation and the passion that's there. So I've learned that health is number one. I often get quoted saying, nobody wants to be the richest man in the cemetery. Even when people tell me, you've got a product, you're going to be a billionaire. I live in Thailand. I don't need to be a billionaire. It's more a hazard rather than a benefit, right? And so being able to share, and that's also the philosophy of decentralization. So I've kind of learned to not get upset about what people are thinking There's always going to be somebody that thinks this is the greatest idea, this is the worst idea, and there's always
I mean,
people in
that's a
opinion,
very,
right?
I mean, it's a very good point there. I mean, I've learned that lesson as well, is to make your own mind up and stop worrying about what other people think. I mean, I agree with that. I think that's a really important piece of wisdom, actually. Let me ask you a sort of variation on that question. If you were to go back to the beginning, is there anything that you would do differently knowing what you know now?
Um, yes, I would probably do a little bit more due diligence rather. I'm a high risk taker, and but I also can afford to be a high risk taker. I come from a family where I didn't have to worry about putting food on the table or anything else. So, um, managing a little bit more my investment, especially my own money, like I manage other people's money when I was a banker, that's one thing that I would do a little bit better. And confronting some of the issues rather than kind of stepping back, which I do today. But there was time during my thing where I was like, oh, yeah, and also kind of managing friends, coworker differently. There is kind of that can be a challenge. But I've made, I don't think I would go back to a corporate job
I
tomorrow.
think
I
I
was
think
asked.
I think a lot of entrepreneurs would say that. I mean, they don't make good employees. I think entrepreneurs they're too used to doing their own thing. And let me ask you. You touched on a few things that you have perhaps haven't done right. I mean, what would you say is the biggest mistake that you've made, and what did you learn from it?
So on a number of time, I've trusted people that were defrauding me, and that's not even the tech part, right? It's like, oh, I'm going to do this if you do that, and they don't do their part. I've lent money to friends that stop being friends because they're not repaying. There's a lot of those hard lessons that. I wish I had somebody controlling me, if you want, or it was not my own money, so I could, it was partially other, so I could. And this is one of the reasons why people tell me you don't need money to do that. I say, well, I'd like to have money because I want somebody else to be watching the books. I want to be building innovation. I want to, being able to be supporting the sales with with my expertise in the product, but I don't want to do the job that I was doing well and being paid for, managing people, finance, and so forth, right? So. That's where I was offered by in Los Angeles when I was living in Cambodia. He told me, we're going to acquire your company. You're going to become CEO of that company. You move to Silicon Valley. And my answer was, I don't want to move to Silicon Valley. He says, well, Hervé, are you a rich man? I said, in Cambodia, I am. And everything is relative. And I think, so many people live for tomorrow. And there's a lot of that when you're developing a product, but also kind of saying, appreciate where you are. And, and I've learned that I don't want to deal with, I don't want to get you bump up YouTube. Hey, hold, if somebody is somebody that I don't want to deal with, why would I want to do business with them? You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. And if you were to offer some advice to a rookie CEO, what would that one piece of advice be?
One of the things I learned right away is also, when you have advisors, listen to their advice, right? Get feedback. You don't have to agree with them, but listen to their advice. And I've learned that as a young CEO when I was in California, and I was part of a group that had the founder of Tech Coast Angel. So the biggest frustration, people put you on their advisor because they want the name, but they don't care about your advice. I think I get a lot more out of some of my advisor, and I think it's important if you're going to have advisors to listen to them.
Mm.
And if they're of no use, then they're not your advisor. You don't need them. But I think that's important. And to be an advisor is there and helps you kind of step back, is outside of the business, and it can guide you and question you and accept that and value it. I value criticism sometimes too much, but I think younger CEO and even as a young banker, I was a little bit um, too ready to fight, if you want, rather than being able to listen and understand. So I think listening, and more important, listen from customer or prospective customer.
Mm.
Right?
I mean, I think your point about, is well made, actually. I mean, there's not a lot of point surrounding yourself with really smart people and then ignoring them, is there? I mean, that seems to me to be a daft idea. I mean, they bring value to the table. That's why you want them, isn't it, really? And, so it's a really interesting point that you make there about that. I mean, I'm a huge believer in surrounding yourself with smart people and listening and thinking about what they say and reflecting on what they say. It's actually really important. And I think your final point there as well about listening to customers is really important. So often when businesses get bigger, they lose track of what matters to their customers, and that's one of the things that causes so many problems. So I mean, I think those are two really good pieces of advice to offer to people. So Herve, thank you for making the time to tell the story about what you've been doing and the things that you've learned along the way and the stuff that you've been up to. I mean, it's a really interesting area, really important at the moment as well. I mean, as we're seeing here, it's so many more scams now. So many people are being caught out. I mean, focusing on ways to protect people actually really, really important. So I think it's a great thing that you're doing. And like I said, thank you for sharing your story and thank you for making the effort to come on and share it with us.
Yeah, I really appreciate. I will say one of the things as the chief and censor that you are, we need to be conscious that it is important to protect people, but
Yeah,
it's also very important to keep privacy so that we fight censorship.
yeah, absolutely. Herve, thank you. I'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye
Bye
bye.
bye now.